Josey, thank you for joining. I'll probably missed a couple of things, but, a founder of Joyful Growth. Josey has spent her career inside dentistry, starting as a hygienist and ending up in one of the most respected system thinkers in the industry. Her work has coached over $1 billion in DSO revenue and developed more than 1,000 dentists. Quite impressive. We are going to get into how she thinks about systems, culture, and where AI is starting to fit in all of this. Josey, welcome to the show. I'm sure you probably can add definitely more accolades, so I'll give you a moment to kind of give us a quick introduction, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And so, a hygienist by training, and then I got into consulting and learned the business side of dentistry. Was an executive in a dental group, so I sat in various different seats: the director of hygiene, the director of culture and HR, the director of operations, and then the COO. And then since then have coached a lot of organizations and have really seen what's happening inside the dental space. Aside from that, I live in Utah. I've been married for almost 25 years. I have 3 kids and a black lab, and I love to be outside. So I'm excited to be with you today.
Amazing. Super exciting. Well, I'll tell you what, I've been to Utah, and everything about Utah I love. It's probably one of the most amazing landscapes that you can surround yourself with. So yeah, I was going to ask you, what are these days in Utah looking like as we head into the summertime? What is the environment like right now?
It's we didn't have much of a winter, so it's probably going to be a really hot summer, but anytime to get in the mountains and do some hiking or some kayaking. And it's just great. Even just walking out on my back porch, I can see the Wasatch Mountains. And I don't know about you, but anytime I go outside, my problems feel smaller. So it depends on the day. I might be like walking to the back porch pretty often.
That's good. Have you been in Utah throughout all your life, or what inspired you to move to Utah?
So I actually grew up in New Mexico, and a little town in northwest New Mexico in the Four Corners. And then we moved to Arizona for my husband's job, back to New Mexico. And then he and I took a giant leap of faith. And I had been working part-time. He had been the breadwinner for our family, but our oldest son has severe special needs. He has autism and a couple of autoimmune diseases. And so about the time he was 13, it was obvious I could not be his primary caregiver. So he and I switched places, and we moved to Portland, Oregon, and then we lived in Vancouver, Washington, and that's where I did some consulting and learned the business side of dentistry. And then the executive job took me to North Carolina. And then after we sold that dental group, I was brought to Utah by a software company, but COVID hit. The software company got hit really hard during COVID. And so that's when I started doing my own coaching and consulting, was June of 2020. So been in, all sorts of places in the US.
Wow, interesting. So you started as a dental hygienist. How did you, what was it about dentistry that all of a sudden you said, this is what I want to do? Well, yeah, this is where I want to pivot into my career, develop into my career.
Yes. So the reason that I chose hygiene, I wish that it was a little more noble than what it was. I was already married and already a mom when I went to school. And so it was looking at the community college. And I knew I wanted to be in healthcare, but I was raised by 2 nurses, and I didn't want to work nights, weekends, or holidays. And I found out dental hygienists can make $35 an hour with an associate's degree. And so I was like, sweet, I'll become a dental hygienist. And then the progression of my career really was, needing to take care of my family and pursuing different interests. And when I started at this consulting company and learned the business and operations and people and how all of those things come together to support clinical work, I just found a lot of joy and excitement and passion there. And so I just kept pursuing that, and it opened a lot of doors for me.
Amazing. Did you always saw yourself as a systems person, or was this something that you grew into as you understand, a bit more of how you were able to see the dentistry business overall?
Yeah, I don't think I was probably necessarily always a systems person, but as I tried to, like, as a clinician, right, as a hygienist or even dentist can appreciate this, we're taught a very methodical process. And so, like, with hygiene, I did get kind of bored because I knew exactly within 60 minutes how long does it take me to do medical history, radiographs, my perio assessment, do the scaling, the polishing, education. It was very repetitive. And so I think by nature of being a clinician, I was a very methodical thinker. And then as I started learning the business, I started reading a bunch of books. and, understanding how people work and trying to solve problems and figuring out how do I take an outcome that I want and how do I reverse engineer that? And then what's the best way to replicate that time and time again? And so it was something that I discovered over time, but I think maybe a natural strength that I have is pattern recognition. And
Right.
so, when it was like, oh, I recognize patterns in people or patterns in the way that things operate. How can I use that pattern recognition in creating systems? And I don't know how much it was natural or how much it was learned, but one of the things where I really, really was strong was, for example, we had practice managers at the dental group and we had very like large locations. And so, the average dental practice across the United States is, maybe when they're doing well is $2 million. However, our locations were between $5 and $7 million with 12 operatories and multiple dentists. And so we had to figure out how to duplicate success very quickly across these locations. And we had practice managers. And I was hearing the expectations of the practice managers from the executive team, but I could then see the practice managers and understand, like, hey, they actually don't understand this. And they don't have this context and they don't have this learning yet. And so what came natural to me was saying, if this is where they need to be and here's where they are today, how do I create a curriculum or a learning path or a training path to help them become the person that they need to be? And as I've applied that over and over and over again, that's a lot of what I've done in my career is the development of people through, again, good systems and good leadership training and supporting them.
Again, wow, that's impressive. So, and we interview many dentists and they all kind of mention the same thing, right? It's like, okay, they go into dentistry through, the clinical perspective, but once they go into business, they kind of don't have any idea how to really
Yes.
operate or manage this business, right? In your case, did you see the opportunity as you were going into consultancy, or you just pivoted into consultancy and realized that, wait a minute, this is so much needed into this the industry overall? How
Yeah.
did yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the consulting company that I did the big jump from clinical into like the business side of it, I definitely learned a lot there. And I also, like, as I looked back, the first dentist that I worked for was the typical, like, great dentist, great clinician, but knew nothing about marketing, knew nothing about sales, or how to run a business, and watched him really suffer and struggle to be able to use his skills. And he was a single provider in, an office by himself trying to make it work. And then one of the dentists that I worked for, several dentists, but they had a consultant, and the consultant was good with like the marketing and the growth opportunities. And so I had a sense for that, but I don't think I recognized it until later. I was put in this business first
Right.
atmosphere. And then they're teaching me a lot about the finances and marketing and operations. And I was like, wow, oh my gosh, this is like a whole, I thought I understood dentistry. Turns out
Right.
I understand clinical dentistry. I didn't understand the business of dentistry. And then through my experience in growing the dental group and starting to coach others, it just becomes more painfully obvious how tough it is to
Right.
be a dentist who's also owning a business.
Yeah. What are those things that you see, let's say, repetitively within as you consult some of these dental clinics, right? What are the common mistakes, or where are some of these clinics, I don't want to say failing, but what are the common mistakes that they're committing, let's say?
I think the greatest struggle that I see inside dentistry is a lack of strong leadership. And I think that when we lack strong leadership, there are symptoms of lots of other things. So I'm going to take the turnover and the retention of team members, and even the fact that, as I don't know how much you know about the shortage of hygienists, but there are not enough hygienists to support the growth. And when you look
Right.
at how we operate, where for every dentist, there should be ideally at least two hygienists, that's a model
Right.
that a lot of people like. But even when you look at the number of dentists and hygienists that we graduate every year, we don't graduate enough. And so one of the kind of plagues in dentistry right now is that hygienists want to operate as temp employees rather than full-time employees. And they're doing that because, one, sometimes they can make a little bit better money, but we all know that patients are better off when they have a continuing continuing care from great providers. And I've never, in the last 6 years, I have facilitated over 350 full day quarterly planning sessions with practices and groups of various different sizes. And there hasn't been a single quarter where every single practice is looking for great hygienists and struggling to find them. And they've had to turn off marketing, they've had to turn away patients, they're getting rid of insurance. And part of the reason is because they don't have enough hygienists. And so some people like to blame the hygienist, right? Like, oh, they don't like to work. They just want all these flexible hours or they want too much money. It's easy to blame the hygienist. However, what they're missing is strong leadership and partnership and collaboration with doctors and even with operational leaders that value them as providers and treat them well and keep them happy in one place. Because the one thing I know about hygienists is they love their patients and they love that continuous relationship. And they're sacrificing one of the things that we love most about clinical work when they become temp workers, but they're kind of tired of not having good leaders who are willing to work with them, communicate with them, collaborate with them, and value their license. And so that I think is something that is an example of why we're struggling is leadership. I could also apply this to associate dentists, where if you want to grow outside of a single doctor in a single practice, your growth is absolutely dependent on associate dentists. And yet, so associate dentists, right now, the average dental school debt is between $500,000 and $800,000. And so nobody pays that amount of money to not be a leader. And yet they act like dentistry is not a leadership career. And
Right.
so we also think that, hey, because there's doctor in front of their name, that means we don't need to manage them or we don't need to lead them. So companies hire associate dentists. They throw them in the operatory to see patients on day one without good training, without good onboarding, without alignment, without even establishing good clinical standards. And yet we wonder why they stick around for a year when we don't take great care of them. And so I think that as we improve leadership, and leadership is not just, do I inspire my people? Do I have a good vision? But really, I'm talking also about systematic leadership. And that's really like what we do inside my program is like, how do we build the systems that create great leadership to take good care of our clinicians and keep them healthy, happy, and engaged long?
Amazing. Well, you talk a lot about high love and high accountability. What do most people get wrong about that combination?
Yeah, we think that love can't be something that is like in the workplace, and I'd love to define love for just a minute and what I mean by that. And so what I have seen is that sometimes dentists will have a favorite employee, a favorite employee. Maybe it was an assistant that started with them, maybe they moved into an office manager and we put this person on a pedestal and we love them and put all sorts of like effort into them. And then sometimes they grow out of the company, right? For whatever reason, or there's a change and they leave. And then suddenly we like blacklist these people and they're the source of all of our problems and they don't speak to them. And it's just this like very toxic kind of environment. So what I mean by love is like, can we actually love people enough that we want what's best for them, even if it means that maybe they don't work for us? What I
Right.
also mean by love is that, hey, can I love this person enough that when they're not behaving in a way that's good for our patients and good for the practice and good for what we agreed on, that I can call them out? And so, can
Hmm.
I want what is best for this person? And can I give them feedback, even constructive feedback, in a way that's still about their growth and not about shame or guilt or making them feel awful? And so that's what I mean by high love is it's a matter of respect and dignity. And even when we exit, can we exit in kindness? And then when we talk about high accountability or high standards, it is that like we in dental, we have the opportunity to work with patients every day who let us into their lives, and it's a very intimate setting and it can be scary and very anxiety driven. Can we elevate our standards and do a better job? I think that hygienists and associate dentists in particular are practicing underneath their license. I don't think that we always provide the best care that we can to patients. And a lot of people love to pick groups apart and DSOs apart and say, oh, that's where the terrible clinical dentistry happens. However, we should be safest in groups because we set standards and we have other people looking at it. It's really easy for a single doctor to hide his or her sins when nobody's like looking at it, right? And do terrible dentistry. But in a group setting, there should be a level of accountability and visibility. And so we want to combine both those things, high love and high accountability. If we think about teams where there's a lot of love, high love, these are the ones that want to go out together on the weekend. They're probably friends, they spend time together, they enjoy each other's company, but they're never getting anything done. They're never
Hmm.
growing, they're just kind of like they go to work and have fun, but they're not accomplishing a lot.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of fun, but there's not performance based.
Right.
Then we have those that are just high standards and no love, and that they may get results. They may be pushing targets, pushing boundaries, but there's a lot of turnover and there's a lot of self preservation, and it's a toxic work
Right.
environment.
Yeah.
And then when we have that balance of like high love and high accountability, that's where we really unlock performance and sustainability.
Right. Well, listen, everything that you are mentioning resonates with, just building the right environment, right? Culture seems to be, in all our talks, no matter what direction you go, everything seems to go down to culture. And that's really what preserves or develops, the success of a team. When you visit some of these practices, how in tune are owners of these practices, or dentists that own these practices? How in tune are them with this side of the equation, right?
Uh-huh,
Is this
uh-huh.
something you sometimes really need to level with them and make them fully understand, or they just see it as a different exchange, or are they open once you come in? Are they fully open to say, wait a minute, maybe I should see it this way, right?
Yeah, really great question. So, I have a company that's called Joyful Growth, and I think those that by nature, it's a little bit of a filter. Like if you can't, be bought around the idea that joy is part of the workplace, you're probably not going to be interested in my program. But I also think I miss a lot of people because they see that and they think that it's really soft when in fact we really do push performance. And so I've been very lucky, and the people that we work with are not people that just want to like build and sell and they don't care. They're just trying to squeeze, some more out of the apple, so to speak. The people that I work with are truly entrepreneurs that happen to be dentists, and they are trying to build a long term scalable solution. I think we've
Mhm.
seen private equity come in and buy a bunch of practices, and we've seen
Right.
some good things and we've seen some damage to the industry. And
Right.
so the people that really resonate with what I'm saying are the ones that are trying to build something different. And so they are very open minded, but I'll tell you that they may not have the language yet to say, oh, I have, I really struggle with standards, or I struggle with love. What they'll say is, I just want my team to be more accountable. I'm not quite hitting performance targets and I need people to be more accountable. And so sometimes they engage us with training. And one of the biggest mindset shifts we try to make is that a lot of people say, oh, it's my team that's not accountable, like it's just the person.
Hmm.
But one of the things that we build out is like, hey, actually, accountability is not just the character strength or flaw of an individual person. Accountability is the byproduct of your environment. So, how do we
Right.
look at your environment, build the right systems, build the right structure, and build the right repetition or rhythm with how you're engaging with your people to drive that accountability up? Because with a great environment, I can take a so personally accountable person and drop them in the environment and increase their level of accountability. And I can take really highly accountable people, drop them into a poor environment, and there's no accountability. So a lot of this really comes down to the environment. And that's the biggest mindset shift with these people that we work with, these clients that we work with, that they feel it, but they don't quite have language, and shifting them to environment versus people.
Great. So systems is a big part of your practice. And, obviously we're here to talk about AI. How do you see technology, right, really supporting this pillar of your practice as far as systems? Are you seeing it also, let's say, in the dental practice what are you seeing there, or what technologies are being adopted? And within your own environment, right, as you build joyful growth, how are you using AI? And I know it's a pretty I just had three
Yep.
questions at the time, but
Yep.
we'll start with one. But and how are you seeing, or how are you using AI? And we'll leave that one maybe for later, because I know you probably have a lot to share. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so inside dentistry, like if you're in a dental practice, obviously we're seeing the use of clinical AI where it's an overlay with the x-ray, right? And it's showing the clinicians stuff that they might not see with their naked eye. I just did a workshop last week and sat in the company Overjet. One of their clinical officers was leading this. And one of the things that really stood out to me that I can totally relate to as a clinician is that the x-ray, if I'm in a if I'm fresh and I'm looking at it at 8 a.m., I might catch something, but in a hurry and tired and short for time at 5 p.m., I might miss something. And so that level of like decision fatigue. So we see the use of like clinical AI and decreasing some of that clinical fatigue. And so I think generally a lot of people are really excited about that. In the beginning, there was a struggle for like associate dentist to adopt that because it felt very big brother. But now I think we see AI everywhere and people are like, oh yeah, there's got to be a better way. So we see the use of that. Obviously, there's a ton of things where they're doing like perio charting or voice charting, where as a hygienist, one of the toughest things is doing that assessment around 6 points around every single tooth I need to document, and
Right.
having somebody come in and do that where it's like I can just call it out and there's AI voice, right, that's charting that. I've seen chart notes where people can just voice dictate their notes, and that's interesting. One of the things we are starting to dip our toe into and looking at a strategic partnership is some ambient conversational listening for AI. And so we worked with an AI company that they are listening to the conversation between the doctor and the patient,
Hmm.
which has been fine. But then we gave it the framework for what we're measuring against to see how the doctors are doing. And this has been so fascinating. So over 200,000 patient doctor conversations. And this is not earth shattering stuff. This is like as simple as, did the doctor introduce themselves to the patient?
Right.
How did they go about making sure that they were asking the patient what they wanted, right? Were they leading the patient? Were they doing a handoff from one team member to the other? Like literally the most basic things. And so we had it score the doctors from 0 to 5 on these like very basic things. And what's funny is you ask the doctors, hey, how often on a scale of 1 to 5 are you introducing yourself to your patients? And the doctors always over evaluate themselves. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm like a 4 for
Yeah.
sure. And you're like, okay, doctor, if I asked your team, what would they say? They'd probably see a 3. And we're like, okay, but what if we told you the conversation was recorded and we could tell you exactly for the last 100 patients that you've seen the number of times you've introduced yourselves? And they're like, so what's crazy is that when they rank themselves at like, oh, I'm a 3 for sure. The truth is it's actually like a 0.5
Point
to a
5.
0.8. Yes.
Wow.
That, that they are even saying, hey, my name is Dr. Sewell. I'm so glad to see you today.
Simple. Yeah.
So simple. So what's been super fun for us is we have a program for associate dentists. And really what we're trying to do is improve their capabilities in case acceptance, but we don't teach them a single clinical skill. We don't teach them how to do a better crown, how to do a better filling. We are literally focusing on the behaviors
Right.
that help increase patient trust and improve case acceptance.
Correct.
And we're selling something that these doctors don't think they need. And so they're like, oh no, this is really basic. This is like, I already do this. I'm already good at it. But when we layer on the AI listening and the reporting daily or weekly, it's about to get a whole lot more interesting. And so we've been piloting this. And right now, what's super exciting is the data shows that there is a correlation with the behaviors that we're teaching. And what's really cool is we now can say, hey, doctor, when you actually talk about insurance and like help them understand the truth of insurance, that means that you can increase your production per exam by $300. hey, hygienist, when you'll actually like talk to the patient first about what you see and then hand it over to the doctor, we see an increase of $500 in production per exam just by you talking about what you already see and do as a provider. And so that's something that's been really exciting, is some of that. And then in dentistry, also you're seeing the voice stuff where it's like the phones and the receptionist. Obviously in revenue cycle management, there's a new AI revenue cycle management company every day of the week, and it's tough
Right.
to keep track of. So I
Mhm.
think that there's a lot of companies that are saying, "Oh, we use AI or we're AI based," and time will tell. Time will tell.
Yeah. Quite interesting. I think that ultimately, and I spoke to a dentist about this, Michael Wu, and he was saying ultimately that, the technology that's going to win the race is the one that actually provides the biggest impact to the customer, the client, right? They could
Mhm,
know about either the technology exists or not, right? But it will enhance the performance, right, overall, whether it's in the clinical part of it or whether it's in the customer service part of it, because ultimately we don't see that as those are meaningful interactions, right, that are, like you said, going to win over the
mhm,
trust of the patient, right, and it's
mhm,
a build up from that point on.
mhm.
In your case, Josie, how are you using AI within your environment? Yeah.
Yeah. So as like a coaching company, we're using it in lots of different ways. And so we are a team of 8 people, but we're trying to use AI in a way that it feels like we're a team of 30 people. So what does it look like for us to create the skills or the agents, right? And I'm probably going to use the wrong word because I'm the end user in my team and not the creator, but having those types of skills created and then even represented on like our org chart, like who uses which skill or which agent and how do we support each other in that and how do we organize ourselves. So that's something that we are trying to do. I've had the experience of like having an assistant and then needing she switched and is doing something else inside the company. So, how do I still manage my email or my calendar or some of those tasks that I've done? I've had to figure out how to do that. And what I'm doing a lot of right now, my primary use is really content development. And so when I say content development, within a given month, every day, I'm doing at least one full day workshop with all of our clients in a group coaching format. I'm doing facilitating a bunch of meetings. I am also building out social media content or lead generation content. We do speaking at various different conferences. And so I used to have a team of people where I had an instructional designer. There was also a graphic designer, and I had somebody who I was the subject matter expert, and we would have this whole team of people working on something for a month. Now I've got my skills built out and I do it myself, and I do it in 2 days instead of 3 weeks. And so
Yeah.
content development is a big one. And then trying to, our program, it's an investment and we want to take great care of our clients. And so we're constantly trying to simplify what it is that we do and make it so easy for them to customize the system to their company and immediately integrate it. So we use a little bit of that. Like, for example, every dental practice needs their documented clinical standards. And it took us years to get our clinical standards documented. And I've also consulted and helped other groups build it, and it takes them years and lots of people. And so what we've done is like figured out how in the matter of like an hour or an hour and a half with a good structure and good format and the use of AI, people are building out customized clinical standards that they can hand to their doctor, the
Right.
next day. Yeah. So lots
Amazing.
of different frameworks and stuff.
Sherry, you have some questions, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So, a lot of consultants and coaching companies, who are growth partners, they're managing a lot of clients at once, So, from your experience, what systems are you using that are, for keeping track of your clients' progress? their team performances and, the follow-ups and the cracks that are being produced from that?
Yeah, really great question, and something that we're kind of in the middle of solving. And so, like just trying to talk about this architecture. So we have within our single program, we have two tracks. I have an associate dentist track, and then I have a clinical leader track. And then for each of those tracks, I have an implementation manager, which is like a project manager and support in the clinical leadership. And then I have Emily, who supports the doctors individually as an accountability manager. And so I have those two tracks. And then we have all these things like clinical leadership masterminds and office hours. And so one of the things we're trying to build out right now is this idea of like the second brain. And so we use Fathom and we record all of our calls. And then we're trying to figure out the connection for like, okay, how do we use Notion? And then how do we use Claude? And how do we pull all of that out? And then we also use Go High Level or High Level, sorry, for the communication back and forth. And so we've had some success in filling out like, hey, here's what a client dashboard looks like. And we know that they're engaged because they're starting to use our language. They're showing up to calls. They have this many of your 16 systems, created. They have 8 created and they're right on track. And so that is not a problem we have totally solved. And that's something that I think we have to have somebody outside of our team. But what is that second brain and that connection that I can pull from it? So right now it's very clunky, and it includes things like tomorrow I have a meeting that I'm meeting with my implementation manager and my accountability manager, and we are going client by client and just seeing like what the status is. But if I can solve that through technology, my life, I will sleep better at night. I will tell you that.
Yeah, so let's assume that that if you have an AI powered dashboard that you're talking about for all the consulting and coaching what you're using. So what do you want to track on that dashboard for your clients? Either the team performance, leadership gaps, KPIs tracking, client general health, what do you want to track? What are the most important key parameters that you want to take into account in that thing?
So what I would love, if I get to dream for a little bit, is I'd like to know on all of the associate dentists, I want to know if they are growing in their production or their impact from learning the skills and applying the skills. I would also like to track key deliverables for the associates. And so one of the things that we do is a quarterly reset or a quarterly planning. And I would like to know, did they do it? What were their answers? What are we learning, from them? Because part of what I'm trying to solve for is the associates communicate to us, and I'm trying to pull those insights together and create a high level overview, like an executive overview, so I can sit down with the person that manages the associates to say, hey, this is what's working well right now. Here's where your gaps are. Here's the conversations that you need to have. And here's the clinical systems we're building with you on this side to help you accomplish this thing. So, some of those key deliverables in the clinical leadership part of it, we have 6 systems, and within those 6 systems, they're basically like 16 different tools or processes at the foundational level that we want them to build and install in their business. And so what I want to know is it documented? Is it built? Is it executed in your business and actually working? And then obviously any type of I'd love to know, are they satisfied with this program? Are they happy to keep paying that check every month? And so those are some of the things that come to mind. But where I'm struggling is the performance data on the associates is the hardest for me to get, because everybody has a different analytics platform and it's all coded a little differently.
Yeah, you're 100% about that. I remember, when talking about specifically the note taking part, and there are multiple tools from which you're pulling up the to dos, and you're continuously taking the notes into your note taker and stuff like that. So I remember, we have had exactly the same problem, in house. We usually
Yeah.
tend to do the pre-podcast calls, and after each podcast call, what Alex usually does is basically, he takes that note taker notes to the team for the review so that they can prepare the stuff for the podcast. So this activity used to happen for almost 2 months. Like, we were having that back and forth for each. So what we did is, I would say 2 weeks ago was we built this platform where we connected our note taker with an AI. So what we are at the moment doing is this AI is basically a brain, a model. So this model is continuously pulling notes from each meeting that in the real time. So it's updating the to-do list for the team also on one side, and it's more like a chatbot also. So internally, these kind of little hacks are helping us a lot in terms of productivity. So now Alex doesn't have to, be sending us, meeting transcript after each meeting. So I think, these small hacks can improve your productivity a lot when you talk about in the bigger picture. And I think the world that we are going to live in the next couple of years will be way more different than we can ever imagine, even with the small use cases, not talking about the bigger changes, especially, in the job markets or, the bigger AI impacts. These small tools and hacks are going to change the world, especially in terms of productivity.
Yes, absolutely. And I love what you're saying. Like, yeah, I can get a fathom output of like what my to-dos are. What I had to do also was like, can it please just go directly into Asana? Because I can't chase all these meeting
Yeah.
invites. And so,
Yeah.
even just that little thing, it's like connecting it to Asana and then being able to go to Asana. And then maybe I get overwhelmed with Asana. So I'm like, hey, Claude, just tell me what to do today.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about 6 different systems, 10 different tools. It's a lot of juggling, back and forth happening between all the tools, because we're pulling data from one, you getting bombarded with all those emails and notifications at the same time. So yeah, it's really hectic. We understand that part.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, the agents are the last new thing, right? And I think we've been in the agentic wave for, I don't know, maybe not even 90 days. I mean, this just came out. It seems like it's already an old thing because it is an AI world, right? But this just started. I think Sheryar has a point. I think that we're understanding that even the little workflows they accumulate, and if you start enhancing those and really organizing yourselves from those little workflows, then it all adds up, right? You save a lot of time in your practice. How are some of your associates like inquiring? Do they inquire about AI? Are they let's say curious? Is this a direct question that you're having with some of your clients, or it's
Yeah.
sometimes something you have to bring up? Yeah.
So with the associate dentists, we don't get a ton of questions. What's interesting is like when you're a clinician living in the operatory seeing patients, it's almost like that's all you think about is what is
Right.
happening within the four walls of that. They don't even realize that
Correct.
there's AI capability in things like even perio charting or voice charting or things like that. They just know about the x-ray one right now.
Yeah.
And so occasionally people will ask, but not really. But the clinical leaders, the entrepreneurs, the owners, the HR person, the ops person, they are definitely asking more questions. But
Right.
still, many of them can't even fathom the thought of using something like Claude to help them get things done. So it's funny. It's almost like they definitely are, but I'd say behind the times a little bit with that.
Yeah.
And so the littlest things make a really big deal to them.
Yeah. Well, I think what you just said, it's not just in dentistry, right? It really is across the board. The solutions are way faster, or the use cases are going way faster than the case studies can be developed. Meaning, as technology is going so quick that I don't think that we're even close to be able to adapt what out there, what's new, right? So I mean, we're just in the beginning stages of this. So I'm curious to see, in your perspective, Josey, how do you see AI, let's say, in the next 3 years? Have you gone so far to even kind of, envision what that world would look like?
Yes. So, yes and no, because sometimes I'm like, ooh, that's kind of scary. I'm not for sure. But what I would love is that, like, let's talk about the dental clinicians, for example, that right now, in order for me to be prepared for my clinical day, I have to come to work 30 minutes early. I have to dig into the chart. I have to click on each patient. And it's sadly like a lot of people don't even spend time seeing who's on their schedule and understanding right before they come in to see them. And then there's a huge disconnect for a lot of dental professionals in my talking about my performance in metrics or numbers because sometimes they think that that's bad. And so we're still just trying to get dental professionals to understand it like, hey, yes, there's a dollar sign because we're measuring it in production, but that's just based on like the units that we have to use with the software. But your production is your impact. So, like, let's think about this in your impact. But what would be incredible is that AI gets to the point where people can have individual, Like I'm headed to work and I get, whether it's a text message or like even like, when you can use the chat feature with like
Yep.
chat GPT, that it's like almost like listening to a personal little 5-minute podcast that's built for me. Like, hey, Josey, these are the patients that you're going to see today. This is what you need to remember. Here's the holes in your schedule. Here are your opportunities. This is how much insurance is available. And so I would love for that for like the clinician. And then if it was also like this voice, this ambient listening, if I also knew at the end of my day, here's how you stacked up, here's what you crushed, here's something that you need to think about tomorrow. And so can we get it to where AI is really coaching us to be better and allows us to be more human? And then for somebody like a practice manager, we have plenty of software analytics, Clarify, Dental Intel, Practice by Numbers, Jarvis, all of these things, but you have to understand them and make sense of it. And so
Mm-hmm.
can AI actually read that and feed back to you in human language? Here's how your practice is doing. Here's something you need to watch out for. Here's the people, that you need to do some extra training with. And so just instead of having to analyze all that information, it's feeding it to
Yeah.
me so that I understand it. I would love to see that it gets to that. And we haven't even talked about what does patient engagement and patient communication look like.
Right.
Even just handling like, hey, Alexander, you need 2 crowns. Here, let's talk about why you need those 2 crowns. Go ahead and pick on here. What are you worried about? What fits in your monthly budget? Like, can you actually help me have patients get more treatment done by making it non-threatening and non-salesy and, more human?
Yeah. Super interesting. Okay. Listen, Josey, you've been amazing, and we're extremely excited about what you shared today. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about those curious to understand how they can take their practice to the next level. How do they reach out to you? How can they get in contact with you?
So if anybody has a practice that, you're bringing in associates and you work with associates or you're a dental group, we are the ones to help support you, whether, again, that's that first associate or the 50th associate. And so you can find me at joyfulgrowth.com, but it's spelled JOYFULL. So joyfulgrowth.com. You can also take a look at another site, which is dentalassociategrowth.com. And if you want to reach out to me, it's just Josey, JOSEY, at joyfulgrowth.com. And we help associates produce more, but not just produce more, but help them be better leaders inside and outside of the operatory. And then we help the leadership teams like build in the right systems to take great care of your associates.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you again, Josey. And hopefully we'll get to connect again in the future, and love to see how everything is, just moving forward. And, if any innovations are changing the way that you manage your business. So I really appreciate you again joining the podcast, and we wish you all the best luck for sure. All right.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you.
Awesome.